Great. Well, thank you, Emily, and I'm really excited about this discussion today and our two great panelists for this session. They are both making impact and difference through enablement in two very different companies, industries, and in very different ways. So I'm really excited to introduce them to you now. So first, I'd like to introduce you to Carrie Frazier. So Carrie is the head of global marketing operations at GE Healthcare. And Carrie led GE Healthcare's initial implementation of Showpad, and she continues to help it proliferate throughout the organization. So we thank you very much for that. Next to Carrie, we have Peter Mertens. And Peter Mertens is the manager of sales readiness at Sprout Social. Sprout is a social media management software company. And at Sprout, Peter is responsible for the entire content strategy, and that includes development of content, distribution, training, and then on top of that, I think you also manage the competitive intelligence program. So both really busy people here. So I think you'll learn. I think you've got some fans out there, Peter. So I think you're going to learn a lot from these guys. So let's go ahead and get started with the questions. So my first question, it really has two parts. Okay. And this whole concept of sales and marketing enablement, has many different definitions. I think as we've heard this morning, oftentimes has different charters, means different things to different companies, even reporting structures. Russell just talked about that as well. So Carrie, I'm going to start with you first. Can you describe what enablement means to GE? And what it looks like, and then also, just talk about your journey to getting there.
Well, actually, I can't. No, I'm just kidding. In a very large organization, there tends to be inertia with organizational structures. In GE Healthcare, we're a $20 billion in revenue annually organization. Many products, many routes to market, everything from instruments to devices to pharmaceuticals to biotech solutions. And traditionally, marketing excellence and commercial excellence have been chartered with delivering processes, training, and tools to make sales and marketing successful. Now, with the sort of new focus on sales enablement, I think we see some evolution there. I did do a quick survey to see how many people are titled with that in GE, and there aren't very many across the different businesses. And where you do find them, they're typically aligned to sales leadership or marketing leadership, okay. So they're directly aligned to the line of business, commercial leaders. What we're seeing really, though, is that content, the content part of the sales enablement has been driven out of marketing traditionally and continues to be driven out of marketing. Where we are with our journey is marketing is incredibly focused now on the customer journey and trying to understand this terrible spaghetti complexity that Russell put up on the board, where there's online and offline parts of the journey. We can't see them all. We're not always there for them, trying to weave that all together and deliver the right content that can be brought to bear. And applying that to sales is even harder, right? Because as a salesperson, when your customer shows up and is ready to talk to you, you just don't necessarily even know where they are on this journey. Right. So what we've tried to do is focus on getting sales and marketing together to talk about this, to figure this out. Because if we can't do it with AI, maybe that's coming, but we can't do it yet. The best way we can do it is working together across the two functions. Absolutely. So that's really what I'm starting to see happen more and more, is more of a sales and marketing partnership around sales enablement. Yeah,
that's great. And it's interesting that in your organization you don't see a lot of sales enablement titles, but yet you do have functions that
everybody's
operate
doing it
that way, and they
Yeah,
align, but they align.
everybody's doing it.
Align,
They're just not. We're not as organized
Right.
as we probably should be yet around
right,
it.
but you align with the sales leaders and the marketing
Absolutely.
leaders. And then the other interesting thing that I took away from your description, and I think it goes back to what Russell said and what I've always believed, is that, you know, whatever you want to call it, this enablement function really has to reduce the friction between sales and marketing, right? And just make the communication much and the partnership much better. So,
Absolutely.
Right. So Peter, how about at Sprout?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the things that's most interesting is that you have a company like Sprout, which is obviously much smaller than a company like GE, but listening to Carrie's description there, we see a lot of the same problems, right? Imagine that many of you, when you look at enablement and where it reports and how does it function and who's responsible for certain activities, is going to be completely unique. And I think that's one of the things that's very exciting about this. So for us at Sprout, I lead our sales readiness team here, and I report to the marketing organization. We actually also have another sales enablement team as well, too. And so when we talk about enablement, it's almost like big E is the team, whereas little e is what everyone is really responsible for. And so it definitely gets broken down into several different buckets when we think about how do we enable sales with content, with product knowledge, with market research, with positioning, et cetera, and it really takes a village in a lot of ways. And so there definitely are clear lines of responsibilities, but it really is everyone kind of pitching in. So it's been very interesting even thus far, hearing from Carrie's experience, hearing some of the customers that I met with yesterday, and understanding, you know, this is a very nascent space for a lot of people, and there's a lot to be learned from what other organizations are ultimately doing.
Absolutely. I mean, again, it's all about the community, and we're all sharing best practices and learning from each other. So my next question is really about, you know, oftentimes sales enablement or a sales enablement practice is started maybe by a lone wolf in an organization who has another full-time job but recognizes a need and starts to pull together enablement an enablement program sort of from a grassroots effort, or maybe an organization recognizes, hey, we need to invest in this thing called sales enablement, so they hire one person, right, and say, hey, go off and solve this problem. So with that, I mean, how do you actually go about and justify the actual resources, budget, headcount, tools that you need, and convince your organizations to invest to build a program that actually would have an impact? So, Peter, do you want to?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that I speak probably for everyone in this room when I say that if I worked 24/7, 365, there would still be more things to do than I possibly could accomplish. Part of that has to do with the fact that there are just more salespeople than there are enablement people. And one of the things that we've tried to be very focused on, and I think is important to keep in mind, is that you can't boil the ocean. You really have to identify that core area where you can make a big impact, identify those one or two key metrics, develop a plan, and work towards that. If you show that you can get that lift in conversion rate, in, you know, ACV, in RPS, whatever it might be, whatever metrics are most important to your business, and you show that with a concentrated effort, enablement can have that impact, you're definitely going to get more attention from the executive team and get the budget that you need ultimately to build out that program. So it's really about identifying those goals and then having a clear plan and a measurement strategy to show that you can get that lift that you're really looking for.
Yeah, no, I love that. And focusing on, you know, identifying first what are the key priorities, the key goals that will actually make an impact, and then back into building a plan, building a program. How about you, Carrie?
So my story is kind of interesting because a few years ago I was hired to do one very simple thing, which was to consolidate the marketing content in life sciences onto one platform so it would be consistently available to our sales team. And that was my job. I took a look at what I was doing and I said, this is nothing that I'm doing here. You know, it was useful. I was working across dozens of marketers and thousands of pieces of content, but we didn't have any insight into what was happening with that content. The salespeople didn't have any insight when they used it, what was happening. And so I kind of self-appointed, you know, into a sales enablement role. And that's when I started looking around at what was available in the company, and we had a lot of homegrown stuff. And a lot of it wasn't very good. Some of it was kind of half training, half e-brochure. And I started looking out there in the industry to see what platforms were available, and that, it was really eye-opening. I was lucky because I had management that was busy deploying a website, so they left me alone. And I had a great partner in our marketing leader and in the commercial excellence person who was a sales enablement professional reporting up into the sales leader. And so we were able to really scale that platform. But I would say in terms of scaling, the really important thing was to start small, do a pilot, show value, show outcomes, and get the users talking about how useful and valuable the solution is. So that is really the key. It's kind of the kernel that you grow from, and then you start justifying a bigger and bigger ask. At some point, all of you, I'm sure, have been in the situation where you're uploading the content, you're doing the admin, you're making it happen. You have to scale at some point. You have to make that ask a big ask. And to do that, you need real data to show what you're going to do for the company. And I'm happy to say that it's 2 years later now, but we have a full-time program leader on board in the commercial excellence function, scaling the solution across GE Healthcare. It took 2 years,
Wow.
but it's quite a journey. But it usually does start with that one lone person who's just trying to do something good.
Yep, no, that's fantastic. Yeah. And I love the concept of just starting with that one kernel, letting it grow, proving the value, getting people, salespeople to talk about how much they like it, how much it helps to build your case and make that journey. So that's a fantastic story. So my next question is really about, one of the challenges that sales enablement practitioners have in trying to determine. I think you talked to Peter about, you really need to pick what's the priority, what are the things that make an impact. But one of the biggest challenges is how do you prioritize initiatives? And how do you prioritize initiatives when you have stakeholders who may not agree? Sales, have you ever been in the situation where sales says one thing, marketing says another? Yeah. So how do you align priorities, manage stakeholders, and actually come to an agreement on what are the programs that you're actually going to focus on so you don't boil the ocean? Peter, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think that one of the things we kind of have to keep in mind in a lot of ways is that we kind of have to play the arbiter for many of these stakeholders. As I mentioned, myself sitting in marketing and being part of our product marketing team, I work very closely with our product managers, with the individuals that are responsible for building these out, but I also work very closely with our enablement team, our sales leadership, solutions engineers, et cetera. And as you mentioned, not always is everyone's goals and initiatives ultimately going to align, and your seat at the table a lot of times is trying to identify areas of compromise in order to actually ensure that these teams can work together and can deliver on these results. So I think it's very important to keep in mind that not everyone is going to get what they want ultimately at the end of the day, but a lot of that is going to be incumbent upon you to figure out how can you get the best ultimate result without sacrificing too much for individuals. One of the things that I think we've done very well at Sprout is we've aligned across levels very closely too. So my boss is very close with our head of sales operations, head of sales, solutions engineers, and head of product. I'm very closely with the management level. Our ICs are very close, so we have a lot of alignment when we actually get directive from up top carried down all the way through. And it's really important that those relations are built out and that trust is ultimately there, because at the end of the day, if you're not all rowing the boat in the same direction, you're probably going to capsize.
Yep, absolutely. Trust, alignment, and relationships. That's key. How about you, Carrie?
Same in a large organization like GE Healthcare, but I think in a very large organization, you also get this phenomena of internal competition, right, for projects. So there's so many good ideas for sales enablement, for example, and there will be other things underway, and there's only so much capacity the sales team has for taking on new capabilities and training and so on. So the The approach I've always taken is to find partners, figure out who in that other side of the organization, if you're in marketing, who in the commercial side, the sales side, who can you make look good with your project. You go talk to them, you see if what they're doing, we can combine forces. And at the end of the day, completely honestly, it usually is going to come down to the sales and marketing leadership aligning on initiatives. And that's really where you want to get it to. They'll know what they need, So you take the options to them, you ask them, and you get them to decide, and then you have alignment, and you're in a much better position.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to that, enablement being in that role to sort of help reduce that friction between sales leadership and marketing leadership to help.
They need a common vision.
They need right, and I think the enablement function is there to help facilitate that discussion and reaching a common vision. So that's great. So the next question is really about how do we measure or demonstrate impact, right? So we just heard from Russell, the importance of data, all this data we have, and metrics. So I guess I'm just curious to understand at this point, what are some of the key metrics that GE measures in their enablement programs?
Yeah, I think there's three things that are important. Number one, you start with this, you end with this, you're always doing this, which is adoption, right? If people aren't using, something you've offered to add value to their process, that won't work. So adoption. The second one is outcomes. So your outcome, depending on who you are, your outcome might be different. It might be revenues, it might be deal acceleration, it might be leads, it might be, but you have to measure outcomes. And then the third one, people sometimes don't think about, but it's insights. So what does your new enablement capability give you in terms of data or insights that will allow you to do things differently and improve the efficiency and effectiveness of your organization? You could be improving the sales organization's efficiency, but you could also be improving the efficiency and effectiveness of the marketing organization. You might end up throwing out half your content. Sounds like a bad thing, but it's really a good thing. If you got the insight to figure out how not to create bad content, that's a very critical outcome of a program for sales enablement.
Right, and I think it's really important to, you can have those insights, but you have to take those insights and ask yourself, what does it mean and what will I do differently, right? So, and I have a platform that will help you with that.
Yeah, that's what our CMO said. He said, this looks like a great program for sales, but you tell me what will I do differently because of this program.
Because I think, I think that's an important question you have to ask yourself, because the insights on their own will be meaningless if you don't ask that question. It's a hard question to ask, because you just talked about throwing out half your assets, right? So that may not be a bad thing at the end. How about you, Peter?
Yeah, I think when we look at from a measurement perspective, one of the things that's important to keep in mind kind of goes back to what I was discussing a little bit earlier around ensuring that you kind of have that idea going into what you're trying to accomplish, right? I think that it's difficult if you don't have that core metric that you really want to impact already in mind when you create that plan and then go to execute on it. It's really hard to go back and do that ad hoc measurement. So that's definitely one of the things I think that is important to keep in mind when you think about what metrics are most important for you to consider as far as whether or not a program was a success. For us at Sprout, there's, as you mentioned, Paul, I'm responsible for our competitive intelligence program, so I'm a little bit biased in my response in that I look at win rate quite a bit in terms of how we perform against our competitors in deals. The other one is really going to be around, as a SaaS business, we're looking at revenue per subscriber. And if RPS is going up and to the right, then we are doing very well as a business. As we roll out new products, that's going to be directly reflected in our RPS, right? Do our sales reps feel equipped to sell that product, to ultimately demonstrate the value that it will bring to our customers, thus resulting in larger deal sizes? That's very much a reflection on the work that we're doing with readiness. And so that's one of the big things I think that when we look at whether or not we're successful is we look at that attach rate for new products, we look at what the RPS ultimately is, and if that's not improving, then I think that that's incumbent upon us to really reevaluate what we're doing from a project perspective and say, do we need to double down and reinvest in this space to ensure that we're actually going to accomplish our goals?
Yep, absolutely. So I think, two key messages here are, you have to, look at the insights, understand what you should do differently, and then also, I think what you're saying is, we need to start measuring higher level or higher impact metrics, right? So are we impacting outcomes, right? And so we just really need to think about, what we're measuring as well. So great, thank you for that. So this is going to be my last question for the panel, and I want to end on an inspirational, positive note. So what I would love to have you both describe is one of your proudest moments in your sales enablement or marketing enablement, but just your enablement efforts to date. And Peter, or Carrie, you want to start with that? Look at my notes.
Sure. So I worked on this sales enablement program, and then I changed jobs. So I had to leave my program right when it was really, picking up speed. But I do still sit with the folks who are in the organization where this was happening. And last year, the marketing folks all got together in Florida for an all-organization meeting, and they came back from the meeting, and I missed it. It was kind of sad, right? But they came back from the meeting and they said, everybody's talking about Showpad. It's been so successful. It was one of the hit, stories of the year. And, that just made me feel fantastic. It didn't matter that I was there, just to know that I had, done something that was creating kind of lasting value, and it was, made me feel great.
Absolutely. There's nothing better than for a sales enablement professional than to hear those kinds of comments, because usually we hear the opposite. We hear the complaints, right?
Yeah, exactly. Customer delight is really what we're talking about.
Delighting our knowing we are delighting our customers. Yeah. That has real satisfaction, yeah. I'm sure. So Peter, how about you?
Yeah. So Sprout Social, as Paul mentioned, we're a social media management company based here in Chicago. And recently we rolled out new functionality in our platform that kind of was our first step outside of the purely social world. So it required quite a bit of enablement in terms of helping our sales reps understand how do you talk about this new space, how do you talk about our value proposition within it, how do you kind of uncover when customers have a need for it as well too. And it ended up being a very cross-functional effort between marketing, product, and sales enablement on the sales side of things to really prepare everyone for this launch. And it was, in the 3 years I've been at Sprout, it was definitely the most buttoned up launch we've ever had all of our materials ready to go in everyone's inbox through Showpad at the time of the launch. We were able to kind of then track how frequently people were using those assets, which was great. We got a lot of good anecdotal feedback from the sales managers in terms of the level of preparedness. But I think the real benefit at the end of the day was 3 months down the road when we looked at how well we were actually getting this product into market. We had seen that over 1,000 of our customers had added this functionality within their platform in just a short period of time. So it was really, in that case, we felt a testament to the work that we had done at the upfront across all of the teams, ensuring that we had the right training in terms of we had the right materials for our reps to send to customers, and then really being able to communicate that value proposition to them. So that was definitely, while it might be a recency bias type of thing, it definitely was one of the instances where it was very cool to see the fruits of our labor come to fruition.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, it's great to get that initial feedback and know that you've rolled the initiative out, you've communicated it well, but when you actually see the results down the road, as in your case, 3 months down the road, then that's truly a satisfaction. So Absolutely. That's great. Well, listen, I want to thank you both for sharing your insights. I hope that next year you'll come back and share more experiences and successes with us at Transform. And I'd like you all to please help me thank Carrie and Peter for being on the panel today. Thanks, everybody.